Imagine being left for a mistress by your own husband. How would you react? For me, it was a devastating blow. I thought I had it all, a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a thriving business as his partner. But behind closed doors, he was living a different life. One that didn't include me. As his wife, I was the CEO's rock, the one who held everything together. I was the one who managed the finances, made key business decisions, and kept our empire running smoothly. But despite my efforts, he chose to leave me for someone younger, prettier, and more subservient. The betrayal cut deep. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, like my whole world had been turned upside down. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and couldn't concentrate on anything except the fact that my husband had abandoned me for someone else. The pain was debilitating, but it also sparked something inside me, a burning desire for justice, for revenge, and for control. As I navigated the dark waters of my emotional turmoil, I realized that I had a choice to make. I could let my husband's infidelity define me, or I could use it as an opportunity to redefine myself. I chose the latter. I decided to take matters into my own hands, to fight for what was rightfully mine, a 50 stake in our empire. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. My husband had built our business from the ground up, and he had a reputation for being ruthless in his dealings. I needed a solid strategy, a plan that would take into account his lawyers, his accountants, and his army of advisors. I needed to be smart, resourceful, and determined. So, I did what any smart businesswoman would do. I hired a team of lawyers and accountants, people who had experience with high-stakes negotiations and business disputes. Together, we pored over the company's financials, looking for any weaknesses or vulnerabilities that we could exploit. We discovered that my husband had taken out loans in my name, loans that I knew nothing about, and that he had used company funds to pay for his mistress's lavish lifestyle. Armed with this information, we launched a counterattack. We filed lawsuits, we demanded access to company records, and we began to build a case for my 50 stake in the empire. My husband, on the other hand, was getting increasingly desperate. He tried to stall us, to delay the proceedings, but I was relentless. I knew that every day that passed was a day that we were getting closer to our goal. And then, the unthinkable happened. My husband's mistress came forward, revealing a string of text messages and emails that showed her husband's infidelity in all its sordid detail. The press got wind of it, and suddenly, our story was all over the headlines. My husband's reputation was in tatters, and I was finally able to get the leverage I needed to negotiate a deal. In the end, we came out with a stunning victory. I walked away with 58 of the empire, a staggering sum of money that would set me up for life. My husband, on the other hand, was left with nothing but the bitter taste of defeat. He had gambled on his mistress, and he had lost. As I stood in the boardroom, looking out at the sprawling empire that was now mine, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that I'd never felt before. I had taken a devastating blow and turned it into a winning hand. I had taken control of my life, and I had come out on top. And as I looked back on that fateful day, I realized that being left for a mistress had been the best thing that had ever happened to me. It had given me the courage to stand up for myself, to fight for what was rightfully mine, and to become the person I was meant to be. You're about to step into the shoes of a woman who's been left for a mistress by her CEO husband. Imagine walking into the boardroom only to find out that your partner, the man you trusted with your future, has been secretly building a new life with someone else. That's exactly what happened to me, and it was a turning point in my life. As I look back, I realize that my husband's transformation started long before the affair. He was always a confident and charismatic leader, but behind the scenes, he was more like a dictator. He made decisions without consulting me, ignored my opinions, and treated our business like his personal playground. His arrogance and selfishness were traits that I initially found charming, but soon became suffocating. I remember the first time he disregarded my advice on a major business deal. He dismissed my concerns, saying I just didn't understand the big picture. I was hurt, but I didn't realize the extent of his disdain for me until later. It was like living with a stranger who had taken over our lives. The affair was the final nail in the coffin. When I found out, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The shock, the betrayal, and the hurt were overwhelming. But as I looked back at our relationship, I realized that I had been living in a state of denial. I had been so caught up in being the supportive wife that I had forgotten to prioritize my own happiness. That's when I met her, the mistress who would become the catalyst for my transformation. She was young, ambitious, and had a spark in her eye that I had lost. At first, I felt a pang of jealousy, but as I watched her interact with my husband, I realized that she was the perfect reflection of him. She was everything I had become, complacent, obedient, and powerless. Something inside me snapped. I knew I had to take control of my life, my business, and my future. I couldn't just sit back and watch my husband dismantle everything we had built together. I started by researching my rights as a partner, reading up on business law, and consulting with lawyers. I was determined to claim my share of the empire, no matter what it took. The journey wasn't easy. There were long nights, sleepless days, and endless meetings with lawyers and accountants. But with each step, I felt myself growing stronger, more confident, and more in control. I realized that I didn't need my husband's approval or validation to succeed. I was capable of making my own decisions, taking my own risks, and building my own future. As I navigated the complex web of business law and financial transactions, I discovered a new sense of purpose. I was no longer just a hurt spouse, but a strategic businesswoman with a clear vision for my future. I started to see the world in a different light, a world where women could be powerful, confident, and in control. The transformation was not just about me, it was about the entire business. As I took the reins, I brought a fresh perspective, new ideas, and a sense of accountability that was missing under my husband's leadership. The company began to flourish, and I was proud of the progress we made. But the real victory was not just about the business, it was about my personal growth. I had taken a painful experience and turned it into a catalyst for change. I had discovered my inner strength, my resilience, and my determination. I was no longer the same woman who had been left for a mistress. I was a confident, empowered businesswoman who had taken control of her life and her future. And that's the story of how I took 58 of my husband's luxury business empire. It's a story of betrayal, hurt, and transformation, but most importantly, it's a story of empowerment. I hope that my journey will inspire you to take control of your own life, to stand up for yourself, and to never let anyone take away your power. You're about to take a walk in my shoes, where the streets are paved with shattered dreams and the cityscape is littered with the remnants of a love that went up in flames. My name is Wife's Name, and I'm the ex-wife of a man who left me for his mistress. Not just any mistress, but the CEO of his company, his business partner and confidant. As I stood in our lavish boardroom, surrounded by the trappings of success, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The man I thought I knew, the man I trusted with my future, had been secretly building a new life with someone else. The betrayal was like a slow-motion train wreck. I knew it was coming, but I couldn't look away. You might be thinking, how could he do that to you? But the truth is, I'm not here to dwell on the past or make excuses for his behavior. I'm here to tell you a story about how I took control of my life, how I turned my pain into power, and how I emerged from the ashes like a phoenix. It started with a spark of anger, a flame that flickered with every painful memory. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, that anger began to morph into something new, determination. I started to see my ex-husband's betrayal not as a personal failure, but as an opportunity. I remembered the countless late nights spent poring over financial reports, the sweat and tears I shed to build our business from the ground up. And I knew that if I could do it once, I could do it again. But this time, I'd be doing it on my own terms. I began to gather my strength, to gather my thoughts, and to strategize my next move. I started to see my ex-husband's empire not as a liability, but as an asset. I saw the value in the brands, the properties, and the investments we'd built together. And I knew that if I could take control of those assets, I could take control of my life. It wasn't going to be easy, of course. My ex-husband had a team of lawyers and accountants working overtime to block my every move. But I had something he didn't, a fierce determination to succeed. I spent hours poring over contracts, studying the fine print, and negotiating with my ex-husband's lawyers. And then, the breakthrough came. We reached a settlement, one that would give me 58 of the empire, and a sense of freedom I'd never known before. It was a bittersweet victory, one that came with its own set of challenges. But I knew that I was ready for whatever lay ahead. As I looked out at the cityscape, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. I'd taken control of my life, and I'd emerged victorious. I knew that I still had a long way to go, but I was no longer the same woman who'd stood in that boardroom, shattered and broken. I'm not here to tell you that I didn't struggle, that I didn't cry, or that I didn't doubt myself. But I am here to tell you that I persevered. And that's what I want to leave you with, a sense of hope, a sense of strength, and a sense of determination. You might be facing your own struggles, your own challenges, and your own betrayals. But I want you to know that you're not alone. And I want you to know that you have the power to take control of your life, to turn your pain into power, and to emerge from the ashes like a phoenix. So, what's the next step for you? Is it time to take control of your life, to stand up for yourself, and to emerge victorious? The choice is yours, but I'm here to tell you that it's never too late to start. As I walk away from this chapter of my life, I know that I'm not the same woman I was when I started. I'm stronger, I'm wiser, and I'm more determined than ever. And I want you to know that you can be too. The question is, what will you do with the power that's been given to you? Will you use it to rise above the ashes, or will you let it fizzle out like a dying ember? The choice is yours, but I'm here to tell you that the power is within you, waiting to be unleashed. As I look out at the cityscape, I know that I've got a long way to go. But I also know that I'm ready for whatever comes next. And I want you to know that you're ready too. You're about to take a deep dive into the world of high-stakes business and personal transformation. Imagine being the wife of a powerful CEO who's left you for a younger, more glamorous mistress. It's a situation that would leave anyone reeling, but you're about to discover that this is just the beginning of your journey. As you step into my shoes, you'll realize that my name is not just a label, but a testament to my resilience and determination. I'm the ex-wife of a man who thought he could get away with it all, the lavish lifestyle, the luxury cars, the high-end penthouse, but I'm about to show him that there's more to being a businesswoman than just being his partner. Growing up, I was always fascinated by the world of finance and business. My parents were entrepreneurs, and I learned the ins and outs of the industry from a young age. I was always the one who sorted out the books, who negotiated deals, and who kept the family business running smoothly. So, when I met my husband, I thought I had found my equal, a partner who shared my passion for business and my drive for success. But what I didn't know was that my husband had a different agenda. Behind closed doors, he was building a new life with a younger woman, one who was more than willing to trade in her dignity for a life of luxury. And when he finally made the decision to leave me, I was left reeling not just from the pain of being abandoned, but from the shock of realizing that everything I thought I knew about our life together was a lie. The business empire that we had built together was a complex web of assets, liabilities, and partnerships. It was a puzzle that I had always assumed my husband had a handle on, but as it turned out, he had been playing a game of financial roulette all along. He had taken risks that I didn't know about, invested in projects that I had never heard of, and hidden assets that I didn't even know existed. But I'm not one to be caught off guard for long. As I began to dig deeper into the company's finances, I realized that I had a unique advantage, my knowledge of the business. I had always been the one who kept the books, who managed the cash flow, and who negotiated the deals. And with that knowledge, I was able to see through the smoke and mirrors that my husband had created. I started by analyzing the company's financial statements, looking for any discrepancies or irregularities. I spoke to our lawyers, our accountants, and our financial advisors, trying to piece together a picture of what had really been going on. And as I delved deeper into the company's finances, I began to realize just how deep my husband's deceit went. He had been hiding assets, siphoning off funds, and manipulating the company's financials to cover his tracks. He had been playing a game of financial cat and mouse, always staying one step ahead of the law and of me. But I was determined to catch up. With my knowledge of the business and my newfound determination, I began to take control of the company's finances. I worked with our lawyers to draft a new business plan, one that would allow us to recover from the financial damage that my husband had caused. And as I worked tirelessly to get the company back on track, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly in control. I was no longer just a wife, no longer just a partner. I was a businesswoman, a leader, and a force to be reckoned with. And as I looked around at the company's assets, at the people who worked for us, and at the future that lay ahead, I knew that I was ready to take on whatever came next. You see, being left for a mistress wasn't the end of my story, it was just the beginning. It was the catalyst that set me on a path of discovery, of growth, and of empowerment. And as I look back on the journey I've taken, I'm reminded that sometimes, it's not what happens to us that defines us, it's how we respond to it. So, if you're sitting there feeling like you're at a crossroads, feeling like your world has been turned upside down, just remember that you have the power to choose your own path. You have the power to take control of your life, to reclaim your dignity, and to forge a new future for yourself. And as you watch this story unfold, I want you to remember that this is more than just a tale of betrayal and heartbreak. It's a story of resilience, of determination, and of the human spirit's ability to overcome even the most daunting challenges. It's a reminder that no matter what life throws at you, you have the power to choose how you respond, and that's a power that no one can ever take away from you. You're about to step into my shoes, where the memories of my former life are still raw, but my determination to rise above the ashes is unwavering. I'm the ex-wife of a man who left me for his mistress, but I'm not the same person I was back then. I've undergone a transformation, one that's empowered me to take control of my life and my future. You see, my husband, the CEO of a luxury business empire, thought he'd gotten away with the perfect affair. He thought he could leave me for a younger, more glamorous woman and I'd simply fade away. But what he failed to realize is that I'm not just a wife, I'm a strategic partner, a businesswoman with a mind of my own. And I had a plan. As I navigated the complex web of my divorce, I began to see the world in a different light. The mansion we once shared, the luxury cars, the lavish parties, it all started to feel empty, like a hollow shell of what we once had. But I refused to let it consume me. Instead, I focused on what I wanted, what I deserved, control. I began to study the business side of our empire, poring over financial reports and contracts. I learned about the intricacies of corporate law, about shareholder agreements and buyouts. And I discovered that I had a natural talent for it. It was like a switch had been flipped, and suddenly, I was no longer just a hurt wife, I was a businesswoman on a mission. With each passing day, my confidence grew. I started to see the world as a place where I could succeed, where I could build something of my own. And I did exactly that. I began to make strategic moves, quietly building my stake in the empire. I negotiated with lawyers, with investors, with anyone who would listen. And slowly but surely, I started to see the fruits of my labor. It wasn't easy, of course. There were plenty of setbacks, plenty of times when I felt like giving up. But I refused to let my circumstances define me. I refused to be a victim of my own story. Instead, I chose to write my own ending, one where I emerged as a winner. And then, it happened. I received the news that I'd been waiting for. I'd acquired 58% of the empire. It was a moment of pure elation, one that I'll never forget. I'd done it. I'd taken control of my life, my business, and my future. But this wasn't just about me, it was about the lessons I'd learned along the way. It was about the realization that I'm stronger than I thought, that I'm capable of overcoming even the most daunting challenges. And it was about the knowledge that I can turn my pain into power, that I can rise above the ashes and emerge as a phoenix, reborn. As I look back on those tumultuous months, I'm reminded of the words I once spoke to myself: you're not just a wife, you're a businesswoman. And it's a mantra that I still live by today. It's a reminder that I'm more than just my circumstances, that I'm a force to be reckoned with. And if you're listening to this story, I want you to remember one thing: you have the power to rewrite your own ending. You have the power to take control of your life, your business, and your future. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let anyone make you believe that you're not capable. Because the truth is, you are capable. You're strong. You're determined. And you're ready to rise above the ashes and emerge as a winner. So, what's next? What's the next chapter in your story? I don't know, but I do know this: it's a story worth telling. It's a story of empowerment, of transformation, and of taking control of your life. And I hope that my journey, my struggles, and my triumphs will inspire you to write your own ending, one that's filled with hope, with promise, and with the knowledge that you're capable of overcoming anything that comes your way. You're about to witness a calculated move, one that will change the game for you and every other woman in a similar situation. You see, I wasn't just a hurt wife, I was a strategic thinker, armed with a deep understanding of business law and a burning desire to take control of my destiny. As the ex-wife of a powerful CEO, I knew that my knowledge of business law would be my greatest asset in our impending dispute. My husband's arrogance and disregard for our family had left me reeling, but I refused to let my emotions cloud my judgment. I took a step back, assessed the situation, and began to formulate a plan. I knew that my husband's company was built on shaky ground, and I had the documents to prove it. His empire was a house of cards, and I was the one holding the ace. I spent countless hours poring over financial records, contracts, and other sensitive information, all while keeping a level head and a clear focus on my goal. My husband thought he could just walk away from our marriage and our shared business, but he was wrong. I had been quietly building a case against him, using my knowledge of business law to my advantage. I filed for a significant portion of the company, citing our prenuptial agreement and the fact that he had been embezzling funds. As the days turned into weeks, my husband's empire began to crumble. His investors pulled out, his clients began to flee, and his reputation was left in tatters. Meanwhile, I was quietly building my own empire, using the skills and knowledge I had acquired during our marriage to turn my portion of the company into a thriving success. But here's the thing: I wasn't just fighting for control of the business, I was fighting for my own self-worth. My husband's affair and eventual abandonment had left me feeling worthless, like I was nothing more than a discarded piece of trash. But I refused to let him define me. I took back my power, and I used it to build something truly remarkable. As I look back on that tumultuous time in my life, I realize that it was a turning point for me. I was no longer just a hurt wife, I was a confident businesswoman, armed with the knowledge and determination to take on the world. My husband may have won the battle, but I won the war. I took control of my portion of the empire, and I used it to build a new life, one that was filled with purpose, passion, and power. You see, being left for a mistress wasn't the end of the world for me, it was just the beginning. It was the catalyst that drove me to take control of my life, to use my knowledge and skills to build something truly remarkable. And as I look to the future, I know that I'm not just fighting for myself, I'm fighting for every woman who's been left behind, every woman who's been told that she's not enough. So, take a page out of my book. Don't let anyone define your worth. Take back your power, and use it to build a life that's truly yours. You are capable of so much more than you ever thought possible. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As I stand here today, I'm not the same person I was all those years ago. I'm stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. And I know that no matter what life throws my way, I'll be ready. I'll be armed with my knowledge, my determination, and my unwavering commitment to myself. So, let's get real for a moment. You're probably wondering how I managed to pull off such an incredible feat. Well, let me tell you, it wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights, endless paperwork, and more than a few setbacks along the way. But I persevered, and I came out on top. Now, I'm not asking you to go out and do exactly what I did. But I am asking you to take a closer look at your own life. Are you letting someone else define your worth? Are you letting fear hold you back from pursuing your dreams? It's time to take a stand, to take back your power, and to build a life that's truly yours. You have the power to create the life you want. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Take control, take action, and watch your world change in ways you never thought possible. You're about to witness a pivotal moment in my story, one that will change everything. As I stood at the crossroads, I had to decide how to respond to my husband's infidelity and subsequent decision to leave me for his mistress. The anger and hurt were still raw, but I knew I couldn't let those emotions define me. I had a choice to make. I could let my circumstances control me, or I could take control of my own destiny. As I looked in the mirror, I saw a strong, determined woman staring back at me. I had always known I was capable of great things, but this moment was different. I had to dig deep and find the courage to stand up for myself, for my family, and for my future. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and began to plan my next move. My husband thought he could just walk away from me, from our family, and from our business empire. He thought he could leave me with nothing but a broken heart and a shattered reputation. But he was wrong. I had a deep understanding of business law, gained from years of watching him navigate the complexities of the corporate world. I knew our partnership agreement, every clause, every detail. And I knew exactly how to use that knowledge to my advantage. I started by gathering my team of advisors, a group of smart, savvy women who had been with me every step of the way. We pored over the partnership agreement, looking for any weakness, any loophole that we could exploit. And then we began to negotiate with my husband's lawyers, using every trick in the book to get what we wanted. It wasn't easy. My husband and his lawyers were relentless, pushing back at every turn. But I was determined to succeed. I drew on every ounce of strength and determination I possessed, using my anger and hurt to fuel my resolve. And slowly but surely, we began to make progress. The negotiations were grueling, the back and forth intense. But I never wavered, never gave up. I knew that this was my chance to take control of my own destiny, to prove to myself and to everyone else that I was more than just a hurt wife. I was a force to be reckoned with. And then, one day, it happened. We reached an agreement, one that would give me 58 of the empire. It was a moment of pure elation, a sense of vindication that I had been fighting for so long. I had done it. I had taken control of my own life, of my own business. As I looked at the papers in front of me, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that I had never felt before. I had turned my pain into power, using my experience and my determination to create a new life for myself. I was no longer just a hurt wife, I was a strong, empowered businesswoman, ready to take on the world. And that's exactly what I did. I began to build a new life, one that was filled with purpose and passion. I poured my energy into my business, using my knowledge and experience to create a successful and thriving enterprise. And I never looked back. You might wonder how my husband handled the news. He was furious, of course. He had expected to walk away with everything, to leave me with nothing but a broken heart and a shattered reputation. But I had other plans. I had taken control of my own destiny, and I was determined to make the most of it. As I stood at the helm of my new business, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that I had never felt before. I had turned my pain into power, using my experience and my determination to create a new life for myself. And I knew that I would never go back to being the hurt wife I once was. This is my story, one of pain, of struggle, and of ultimate triumph. It's a story about taking control of your own life, of using your experiences to fuel your determination and your passion. And it's a story about the power of women, about our strength and our resilience in the face of adversity. So, as you watch my story unfold, I want you to remember one thing: you have the power to create your own destiny. You have the power to turn your pain into power, to use your experiences to fuel your determination and your passion. And you have the power to take control of your own life, to create a new life for yourself that is filled with purpose and passion. Let's continue this journey together, shall we? You stood at the crossroads, the pieces of your shattered life scattered around you like broken glass. Your husband, the man you thought you knew, had left you for his mistress, abandoning you for a life of luxury and ease. But you weren't just a hurt wife, you were a strategic thinker, armed with a deep understanding of business law and a burning desire to take control of your future. As you began to piece together the fragments of your life, you realized that your husband's departure wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was also a business opportunity. Your husband's empire, built on years of hard work and determination, was now within your reach. And you were determined to take it. You started by gathering your thoughts, poring over financial records and business plans, looking for any weakness or vulnerability in your husband's empire. You knew that you had to move quickly, before he could sell off assets or liquidate the business. You were a master of strategy, always thinking several steps ahead. Your husband, on the other hand, was a man consumed by his own ego and arrogance. He had always taken your business acumen for granted, assuming that you were simply a pretty face, a trophy wife who would look good by his side. But he was wrong. You were a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had a deep understanding of the business world and was not afraid to use it. As you delved deeper into the financial records, you began to see a pattern emerge. Your husband had been embezzling funds, using the company's money to finance his lavish lifestyle and pay off his mistress. You knew that you had to act quickly, to secure your portion of the empire before he could cover his tracks. You spent countless hours negotiating with your husband's lawyers, using your knowledge of business law to outmaneuver them at every turn. You were a chess player, always thinking several moves ahead, and you knew that you had to be ruthless if you wanted to come out on top. The negotiations were grueling, with both sides digging in their heels and refusing to budge. But you were a woman on a mission, driven by a fierce determination to take control of your future. And in the end, your hard work and strategic thinking paid off. You secured a deal that gave you 58% of the empire, a staggering amount that would give you control over the company's finances and operations. Your husband, on the other hand, was left with a mere 42%, a paltry sum that would barely cover his living expenses. As you walked out of the negotiating room, you felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that you had never felt before. You had taken control of your life, using your business acumen and strategic thinking to turn your pain into power. You were no longer just a hurt wife, you were a confident businesswoman, ready to take on the world. The deal was finalized, and the news spread like wildfire through the business community. Your husband's empire was no longer his to control, it was yours, a testament to your strength and determination. And as you looked out at the sprawling cityscape, you knew that you had truly arrived, that you were a force to be reckoned with. The question on everyone's mind was, what's next? Would you use your newfound power to exact revenge on your husband and his mistress, or would you use it to build something new and better? The answer, as always, was up to you. But one thing was certain, you would always be a woman on the move, a force to be reckoned with, and a shining example of what it means to turn your pain into power. You stood in the aftermath of a deal that would change your life forever. The ink on the papers had barely dried when the reality of what you'd just accomplished hit you like a tidal wave. You'd taken 58% of your husband's luxury business empire, leaving him with a fraction of what he once controlled. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. As you looked back on the journey that had brought you to this moment, you couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. You'd started out as a hurt and betrayed wife, struggling to come to terms with the fact that your husband had left you for his mistress. But something inside of you had shifted. You'd found a strength and determination that you never knew you had. You thought back to the countless nights you'd spent poring over financial reports and business strategies, trying to understand the intricacies of your husband's empire. You'd devoured books and articles on entrepreneurship and negotiation, seeking to arm yourself with the knowledge and skills you needed to take on this challenge. And then there were the long, grueling meetings with lawyers and accountants, as you worked tirelessly to untangle the complex web of assets and liabilities that made up your husband's business. You'd faced down skeptical advisors and hostile opposing counsel, never once backing down from the fight. But it wasn't just about the business. This was about you. About reclaiming your identity and your sense of purpose. About proving to yourself and everyone else that you were more than just a hurt and abandoned wife. As you looked out at the sprawling landscape of your new empire, you felt a sense of awe and wonder. You'd done it. You'd taken control of your life and your future, and you were ready for whatever came next. The deal had been a game changer, but it was just the beginning. You knew that there would be challenges ahead, that there would be people who would try to take you down or undermine your authority. But you were ready. You'd been through the fire and emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. You took a deep breath, feeling the weight of your new responsibility settle onto your shoulders. You were the CEO of your own destiny, and you were ready to take on the world. As you walked out of the meeting room, you felt a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over you. You'd come a long way from the broken and betrayed wife you once were. You'd found a new sense of purpose and direction, and you were ready to take on whatever came next. The future was bright, and you were ready to shine. You stand at the threshold of a new era, the remnants of yesterday's heartbreak slowly fading away. The ink on the papers has dried, and the reality of your situation is finally sinking in. You've taken 58 of your husband's luxury business empire, leaving him with a fraction of what he once controlled. But this isn't just about revenge, it's about transformation. As you look out at the sprawling landscape of the empire, you can't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. You've come a long way from the broken-hearted wife who stood in the ashes of her shattered life. You've emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. Your vision for the future is clear: to use this business as a force for good. You want to make a positive impact on the lives of people who have been marginalized, overlooked, and underappreciated. You see an opportunity to create a legacy that will outlast you, a testament to the power of resilience and determination. You know that this won't be easy. There will be challenges, setbacks, and critics who will question your ability to lead. But you're not just a businesswoman, you're a survivor. You've faced the darkest corners of your own heart and come out the other side. You've learned to harness your strength, to channel your emotions into something constructive. As you look to the future, you're not just thinking about the business, you're thinking about the people who will be affected by your decisions. You're thinking about the communities that will be lifted up, the lives that will be changed, and the opportunities that will be created. You're thinking about the kind of leader you want to be, and the kind of impact you want to make. Your growth and transformation have been nothing short of remarkable. You've gone from being a hurt and vulnerable wife to a confident and empowered businesswoman. You've learned to trust yourself, to listen to your intuition, and to trust your instincts. You've discovered a strength within yourself that you never knew existed, and you're determined to use it to make a difference. As you embark on this new era, you're not just starting a new chapter, you're writing a new story. You're the author of your own destiny, and you're determined to make it a bestseller. You're not just a businesswoman, you're a force to be reckoned with. And you're just getting started. The world is watching, and they're waiting to see what you'll do next. Will you rise to the challenge, or will you falter? The choice is yours, and the stakes are high. But one thing is certain, you're ready. You're ready to take on the world, to make a difference, and to leave your mark. The question is, what will you do with this opportunity? You stood at the threshold of a new era, one that was both exhilarating and unsettling. The ink on the papers had dried, and the reality of your situation was finally sinking in. You'd taken 58 of your husband's luxury business empire, leaving him with a fraction of what was once yours. As you reflect on the experience, you realize that it's taught you some valuable lessons. You've learned that resilience and determination are not just buzzwords, but a way of life. You've seen firsthand how quickly circumstances can change, and how essential it is to be prepared to adapt. You think back to the days when you were just a hurt spouse, struggling to come to terms with the betrayal. The affair, the lies, the heartbreak, it all feels like a distant memory now. You're no longer the same person you were then. You've grown, you've evolved, and you've emerged stronger and more confident. The experience has also taught you the importance of taking control of your life. You didn't let circumstances define you. Instead, you took matters into your own hands. You leveraged your skills, your knowledge, and your resources to reclaim what was rightfully yours. And in doing so, you discovered a newfound sense of purpose and direction. You look back on the months that followed, and you're reminded of the countless sleepless nights, the endless cups of coffee, and the unwavering dedication it took to turn your life around. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. You've learned that true power comes not from being given it, but from taking it. As you move forward, you're not defined by the pain of your past. Instead, you're fueled by the lessons you've learned and the strength you've gained. You're no longer just a victim of circumstance, you're a force to be reckoned with. You're a testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience, determination, and growth. You think about the CEO husband, and you realize that he never saw you as an equal. He never valued your contributions, your ideas, or your perspective. But you've proven him wrong. You've taken control of your life, and you've emerged victorious. The experience has also taught you the importance of self-care and self-love. You've learned to prioritize your well-being, to nurture your relationships, and to focus on your personal growth. You're not just a businesswoman, you're a woman, first and foremost. As you look to the future, you're filled with excitement and anticipation. You know that there will be challenges ahead, but you're ready. You're armed with the knowledge, the experience, and the determination to succeed. You're no longer just a survivor, you're a thriver. You're the CEO of your own life, and you're ready to take on the world. You stood at the threshold of a new era, one that was both exhilarating and unsettling. The ink on the papers had dried, and the reality of your situation was finally sinking in. You'd taken 58 of your husband's luxury business empire, leaving him with a fraction of what was once yours. It was a bold move, one that had taken months of strategizing and preparation, but it was a decision that had set you free. As you looked out at the sprawling cityscape, you felt a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over you. You'd done it. You'd taken control of your life, of your future, and of your business. The weight of your ex-husband's affairs, the shame and the hurt, it all seemed to fade away in the face of your newfound empowerment. You thought back to the days when you'd felt trapped, when you'd thought that you were nothing without your husband's name and his wealth. But that was a lie that you'd bought into for far too long. You were more than just a wife, more than just a business partner. You were a woman with a vision, with a dream, and with a plan. And now, as you stood at the helm of this new era, you felt unstoppable. You felt like you could conquer the world, like nothing was impossible. The 58 of the business empire you'd acquired was just the beginning. It was a stepping stone, a foundation upon which you could build a new life, a new career, and a new sense of purpose. You thought about the lessons you'd learned along the way. The lessons of resilience, of determination, and of taking control of your own life. You thought about the sacrifices you'd made, the sleepless nights, the endless days of strategizing and planning. But it had all been worth it. Because now, as you stood here, you knew that you were a woman who could achieve anything she set her mind to. You knew that you were a woman who was worthy of love, of respect, and of success. And that knowledge was the most empowering thing of all. As you looked out at the city, you felt a sense of excitement and anticipation wash over you. What would the future hold? What new challenges would you face? What new opportunities would you seize? You didn't know, but you were ready. You were ready to take on the world, to make your mark, and to leave your legacy. And so, as you stood at the threshold of this new era, you knew that you were not just a woman who had been left behind by her cheating ex-husband. You were a woman who had been transformed, who had been empowered, and who was now unstoppable.